What would you do if the legal system failed to provide justice? If doctors were unable to find the cure? If law enforcement couldn't solve the crime? Would you give up? Or would you resort to desperate measures? While most fathers and sons share a common bond, Doug Finley's relationship with his dad was especially close, due in part to a mutual love of boating.
I remember when he built the sailboat for me when I was young. He was a hard worker, but knew how to enjoy life, knew how to relax. As a result, he always devoted a lot of time to his family. We had a vacation home at a lake, and we spent all of our weekends down there. We became a very close family on the weekends through boating.
And as weeks turned into years, Sherwin and Doug Finley's bond continued to grow.
My father was my best friend. In fact, he was my best man at my wedding. And we were in partnership on a boat.
And so when Doug and his wife Joyce moved from Missouri to the coast of Florida, it wasn't long before Sherwin Finley followed.
I called my parents and talked them into coming down to Jacksonville to spend the winter. I had my boat here, and there were a lot of new areas, for them to see.
Up the stairs?
Doug also arranged for his parents to rent an apartment in the same complex where he lived. And their boating adventures were underway. It was March 1990, and Doug's sister Gay Lynn was visiting for the first time.
Had a good time. Okay, Doug.
All right, I'll call you tomorrow.
Good night, Doug.
Bye.
We had just returned home from an overnight boating trip. We'd had a great time. Doug went to his apartment, and we proceeded across the walk into our own.
No one suspected that in the next few minutes, their perfect world would be turned upside down.
Mom, did you order a package? There's a
No.
package here.
Dad?
Not that I recall.
We thought it was very strange that this box would be sitting at their front door. My mom joked that it possibly could be a bomb, and my father laughed. We all kind of laughed about that.
I'll get it in a minute. I gotta go back out to the car anyway.
Oh, okay. Just leave it there, hon.
My mom and I were unpacking, and my dad went back out to get another load from the trunk of the car.
After returning from a weekend of boating, Sherwin Finley and his family discover a mysterious box on their doorstep. Sherwin's wife jokingly suggests it might be a bomb, and moments later, her prediction comes true.
Sherwin!
The explosion was deafening. My mother and I both ran to the front door, and that's when we found him laying on the concrete in front of the door. He was face up, and he had massive head injuries. He had massive stomach injuries.
Go get somebody to help. Go get your brother.
She was trying to comfort him, even though he really did not know that she was there.
Hurry!
As Dorothy cradled her husband in her arms, Gay Lynn ran to find her brother.
The apartment complex is a big complex, and I knew that there was probably no chance I would find him because I'd never been to his apartment before.
Do you know where Doug Finley lives?
As Gay Lynn's frantic search continued, help arrived. But Dorothy Finley knew it was too late.
He was breathing, but I knew for sure that he probably couldn't live. And to see him the way he was, somebody you'd really love.
Hurry!
It was devastating.
As Sherwin Finley's life slipped away, Gay Lynn finally arrived at her brother's apartment.
And I opened the door, and that's when I knew something was wrong.
But when he reached his father, he couldn't believe what he saw.
It was kind of surreal. You could still smell burned powder in the air, and you could hear my mother, crying. I didn't know what to do. It's your best friend, it's your father, it's something that's beyond belief. It's worse than your worst nightmare.
My brother tried to prepare both my mom and I that he probably would not make it. I never said goodbye to him. Because when you lose someone in this way, there's no goodbyes. It's not the way that things are supposed to happen.
Is he okay? Is he up there?
When Doug's wife, Joyce, arrived on the scene, she found her husband numb with disbelief.
Doug was very passive. He was very quiet. I think perhaps he was in shock. It seemed surreal to think that a bomb had actually exploded outside my father-in-law's apartment. I couldn't imagine something like that happening.
The Finleys were not the only ones baffled by this senseless murder.
I am standing in front of the apartment where a bomb has claimed the life of 70-year-old Missouri resident Sherwin Finley. While the police are continuing their investigation, currently there are no suspects.
Investigator Gayward Hendry was assigned to the case, and from the beginning, it was difficult to find a motive.
A bombing is usually very specific in nature. Being an investigator, you think that someone had a reason, a vendetta, if you will, to either injure Mr. Finley or kill him.
They didn't even live here. They were down here on vacation.
Did he owe anyone any money?
No.
Did he gamble?
No. My father had no enemies. So there was literally nothing that we could give them to work with, nothing whatsoever. You can dig as far as you want to dig, and you're not going to come up with anything on my father.
The only clue in the case was a composite sketch of a man seen leaving the area that night. But the investigators needed more.
They wanted to know if I had ever seen anybody around the apartment complex that looked like the composite, which I had not.
And are you aware of any outstanding work orders or maintenance orders that your parents may have had with the apartment complex? Anything?
There were no outstanding work orders. So at that point, I knew that they at least had a suspect. So you put your faith in them to do the job, and you just hope they can do it, and you're confident they can do it.
While he waited for answers, Doug tried to stay optimistic, but it wasn't easy.
You're just tormented with constant thoughts of replaying that night over and over in your mind. The ambulances, the investigative officers, your mother crying. You're just tormented with that constantly.
It wasn't just the cruelty of the crime that tortured Doug day and night. Something else was eating away at him.
Doug felt a lot of guilt because he was the one who chose the apartment where his father would be living. He felt like he was the person to blame for his father's death.
Joyce and I got back in town, and I'm really just calling to kind of find out what progress you've made.
And as weeks went by without an arrest, Doug's anxiety only grew.
How can it be when the very night that this happened, you had a guy walking away from the scene? I mean, you guys, remember you made a composite up. They basically said that they were running into some problems with the investigation. And so that started to concern me.
Doug needed better answers than the ones police were giving him.
Mr. Finley, we need facts. We need evidence. We can't just go around arresting people.
This guy built a bomb. He built it someplace.
That's correct.
In his house or wherever he built it. Each day, each month that passes, that evidence is going to disappear. They were not as positive on the case anymore. They were backpedaling. It was a hard thing to take, when you realize that this guy's going to walk from this.
It was time for Doug Finley to get personally involved.
And so I started to really think about things more. I started to think about the outstanding work order. And I figured that was probably a very, very important clue to me as to where their investigation was going and who the suspect might be.
Doug decided to do a little investigating on his own.
I went to the apartment manager I asked her about a couple of maintenance men had left, and I was just curious as to where they had gone.
We had to let the other one go.
Let go. Do you know why?
No.
Can you give me an idea, or is there any way we can get in touch with him?
You're going to have to call the main office to get any information. I'm sorry. And I have an apartment to show, so I'm going to have to go. Thank you very much.
She just kind of brushed me off. And at this point, I thought the apartment complex might be hiding something from her family. I decided to play my hunch. I contacted a police investigator. I said, "How's your case going with the maintenance man?" He said, "We think we've got the right guy, but it's just taking longer than we expected." Of course, that was quite revealing because he pretty much confirmed that it was a maintenance man.
But the more time it takes to get the information, the better our case becomes.
And I asked him, I said, "What made the guy so mad that he would put a bomb there?" And he said he was mad at the girl that fired him. Then why can't you get an arrest? He was a maintenance man. He knew how to build this bomb. He fixed electrical devices over there, wiring, air conditioners,
And Grimes is still our main focus in this case.
And right there, it clicked that he had said the name Grimes. Now I could focus on an individual, a specific person.
Doug recontacted the apartment manager, posing as an employer checking on a job applicant.
I had to pick a name, a first name, to go with this last name. So I picked the name John Grimes only because it's probably the most popular name. She said, "We never did have a John Grimes work for us, but we did have a Jim Grimes." His name is Jim. I immediately went to the phone book and started phoning all of the people who had a last name of Grimes.
And it didn't take long before another piece of the puzzle fell into place.
"Yes, is Jim Grimes there?" She said, "No, he doesn't live here, but he's my son." Yes, I'm with the parcel service, and we have a package for him, right? And what I'm wanting to know is the address label has had some water damage. I said, "Could you help me with his middle name and his address?" And surprisingly, she told me that his middle name was Arthur, which was going to be important for looking up courthouse records.
As Doug began digging into Grimes' past, he couldn't believe what he uncovered.
I found a lot of rather disturbing information. He had firebombed a building, threatened to kill witnesses at a trial, shot one of his ex-wives. The depositions on case 83-301.
Here you go.
The deeper I dug, the worse his past got. When I saw his face in those mugshots, it just heightened the rage that I had for him. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to get rid of him. I wanted to remove him from society.
Armed with his findings, Doug returned to the investigators.
He's a big bragger. He brags to people about everything he's done in his life, and he's getting away with murder. So I know he's talked to somebody about what's happened over there.
But prosecutor John Phillips couldn't give him the satisfaction he craved.
The problem with the case was that we had motive, we had opportunity, and we had bad record, and that's all we had. We just didn't have enough evidence to arrest Mr. Grimes.
And we're discussing those very same people that you're talking about.
You may not be talking to some of the people I've talked to.
You've obviously done your homework. Allow us to do our jobs.
Somebody had to do something with this guy. And since the system hadn't really dealt with him, then I felt it was going to have to be me. From his police records, I obtained his address. His house was exactly like I would picture it. It was very seedy, it was run down. I realized he had a certain amount of mental instability, and if he mentally cracked, he would be vulnerable and might slip up and might confess. And I concocted a plan to basically ruin his life.
Coming up, Doug Finley resorts to desperate measures to bring down the man who murdered his father. After discovering the identity of the man suspected in his father's murder, Doug Finley embarks on a one-man crusade to bring him to justice. And when he finally comes face to face with the killer, it only strengthens his resolve.
I was angry. He was doing his daily routine, and my father wasn't. I could not live the rest of my life knowing that that was going to happen. But I knew I had to control myself because I was on a different mission at that point. It was not a mission to do him any physical harm. It was on a mission to do mental harm. The first thing I did is I went to a payphone. Jimmy, you like bombs? Somebody's looking at you. Over a period of a month or so, I would call many times. You ever heard bombs go boom? Well, I have. I knew he had a lot of enemies. I didn't really want him to know where these threats were coming from. Sometimes I would, late at night, cut letters out, and they might say, "The end for you is coming," or "I know you're the bomber."
While Doug's obsession was helping him cope with the loss of his father, it was taking its toll on the rest of his family.
I got angry at Doug and I said, "You've got to stop this. You could be hurt. I could be hurt."
I was very fearful that Grimes would come after Doug. I begged and pleaded and cried to have him stop, but he said that he wasn't going to stop.
I knew Jim Grimes like the back of my hand. I knew what he drank. I knew he liked chicken wings. I knew his dance clubs he went to. The more I knew about him, the more that I knew that I could succeed in finding a way to get him to crack. One night, I took a can of spray paint and sprayed Bomber on the side of his car. The next day, I drove by, and he was filing a report. It made me feel good to see what I had done, because he was going off the edge. It was just a constant harassment over a period of time. "I'm watching you." I made phone calls, I put nails in his driveway, and then I would go down to the police station and I would pull the incidents reports. I was hitting him so hard that he was calling the police to come out to his house for harassment that even I wasn't doing.
But as Doug grew bolder, he also began drawing attention to himself.
I realized that this was Doug's way of coping, but I didn't want him to do something that was going to get him thrown in prison for the rest of his life.
I remember one time after I had mailed a letter, my wife was talking to some agents that had shown up. When I went up, they told me that I needed to back off. They warned me that I might be harming the investigation. I said, "But there is no investigation. You guys aren't doing anything anymore. It's not active. And if you're not going to be active in the investigation, then I'm going to do it." They couldn't intimidate me. They couldn't intimidate me because even if they had handcuffed me and taken me down to the jail that night, that would have been okay with me. I wanted to go to jail because of the guilt that I felt having had a hand in my father's death by bringing him down to Jacksonville.
Far from making Doug back off, the visit from the detectives spurred him to take even greater risks.
There were even times when I went into his house. I was just trying to gather any kind of evidence that might bring him to justice. There were bills, just hundreds of bills business cards, invoices, places he had done work. I found address books with names, which I knew would be leads that I could then pursue. At one point, I saw a briefcase in the middle of the living room, and I was very tempted to open it. But it was kind of odd because it was kind of sitting out there in a place that you wouldn't think of a briefcase to be, almost like it was, come open me. It could be a bomb. It was probably the scariest moment of my life.
The greater the risk, the greater Doug's determination grew.
I knew what I was doing was working, that he was cracking, and it was only going to be a matter of time.
But Grimes was not the only one cracking.
I was afraid of Grimes because from what I had known of him, I knew that he was a very dangerous person.
But what if he does do something to you?
Things got so bad that I finally, out of frustration, said, Doug, you need to give the legal system another chance. You need to get on with your life.
After 4 years of daily obsession, Doug Finley finally relented.
And so I decided to take what information that I had and to contact the state attorney's office. They were really the last resort, the last hope that I had, the last bridge I hadn't burned, so to speak.
Doug found a sympathetic ear in former investigator Gayward Hendry, now a special prosecutor in the state attorney's office.
It was obvious from talking with Mr. Finley that he was on a mission.
Where did you get all this information, Mr.
Finley? Just a lot of work, a lot of hours.
Doug Finley had done a very thorough job in collecting the information. And certainly at the time, I felt that it was worth looking at.
Hendry enlisted the help of prosecutor John Phillips and promised Doug he'd reopen the case.
Investigator Hendry gave me hope. He was a godsend. It felt great to realize that finally, after about 4 years, that somebody was going to pick up the ball and run with this. One of the important things is that Grimes isn't the cocky, smirky guy that he once was.
Well, that's a shame.
Doug's painstaking work led the prosecutors to a Grimes associate and a possible break in the case.
The cooperating individual relayed to us conversations that he had had with Mr. Grimes the year after the bombing, in which Mr. Grimes alluded to the fact that he was the one that actually did the bombing. We told Mr. Grimes through the cooperating individual that there was a person who was interested in hiring someone with his talents.
Posing as a member of an organized crime group, Hendry would meet with Grimes and try to get him to confess to the bombing.
Come on in, son. Have a seat. I spent probably the greater part of an hour laying out my proposal to him. Occasionally people get in a mindset that they're just not going to pay, and we need to deliver them a message. I asked him, basically, did he have any experience in this field?
Well, I firebombed a furniture store, and I also left a nice little package bomb at an apartment complex.
Mr. Grimes, at that point, went into some detail about the design and construction of the bomb. We're talking about 1989 on Confederate Point Road. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, that's the one.
I'd done this for 25 or 30 years, but I was really having a hard time containing my emotions because I knew we were where we needed to be. What I'm asking you, if you need to go and kill somebody at my direction, that's what you're going to do, no questions asked. Is that fair to say?
Boom, they're gone.
Please, okay, get out on the floor. Get down on the floor and let us see those hands.
It had taken nearly 5 years, but Sherwin Finley's killer had finally been brought to justice.
I was just absolutely ecstatic. Grimes was finally going to pay for what he did.
I didn't do anything.
And it might never have happened if it weren't for the diligence of a loving son.
Doug's tenacity and efforts were very much instrumental in bringing the case to fruition. There's a good possibility that had it not been for Doug, that we would still be considering this case one of the unsolved homicides of our area.
While Doug Finley's efforts in solving the case had been successful, his methods had often placed him in great danger.
I certainly do not recommend that people go out and follow in the footsteps of Doug Finley. First of all, they certainly could become the target of the next homicide. And secondly, although this case did work out well, many times we see that the efforts of non-law enforcement personnel actually muddy the water for those of us who are out there doing the investigation.
For the people who would say that Doug was crossing the line, there were times where I definitely would agree with those people. However, you didn't see your father who was blown up by a bomb, and it's very easy to make these judgments when you haven't gone through what someone else has gone through.
James Arthur Grimes' arrest brought closure to a baffling and senseless murder. And in March 1996, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Finley family could finally grieve for the terrible loss of their loved one in the place where he had always been happiest.
When we're back on the water, I feel my dad all around us. His presence is constantly there.
I think about how he would enjoy being with me, all of the adventures that we had that we can't take anymore. It's very bittersweet.
I think Dad would be very proud of his family. I think he would be proud of my brother's relentless will.
I don't recommend doing what I did. It didn't bring back my father, but it did allow me to close a chapter and to go on. Sometimes people have to take desperate measures. They have to stand up. I can certainly live with myself. I could not have lived with myself if I had done nothing.
Coming up, a woman single-handedly attempts to bring down a criminal on the run.
You don't have time for a whole lot of fear. Your mind is in the mode of, is this man going to give me trouble? Does he carry a gun?
Brenda Dishbine has a job to do.
I like living on the edge of anything.
A job that most 51-year-old grandmothers wouldn't even consider.
You just never know what to expect because anything can happen.
And in Brenda's line of work, anything can mean danger.
I know how to use a gun, and I do carry 2 of them. One you're going to find, and you're probably going to get it before I do because you're bigger than I am. And the other one I'm going to have on you before you figure out how to use the first one.
Brenda's not a detective. She's not an undercover police officer nor a bounty hunter. Brenda Dishbine works in the small community of Farmington, Missouri as a bail bondsman.
Good morning. How are you? Great, and you?
Brenda works alongside her daughter, Bobby, and her boss of many years, Cody Ice.
Okay. Well, check the case out for me and give me a call back. My boss just walked in.
Bail bonds is provided by the Constitution of the United States. The idea was to be able to make bond so that you could get out of jail pending trial.
Well, they don't have all the security that they need on the bond. Basically, we do all the paperwork. We need a co-signer or we need some collateral to back up the bond. And then the defendant is released until their court date to show up in court.
Should they fail to show up in court, that's when we go to looking for them.
I really think if they can't come up with it all, then he's out of state. Why should we risk doing the bond?
Let's don't do it. I've always said that one of the things about the bail bond business is you can't write a manual for it because everything is different. Every case is different. Every phone call is different.
Good morning, C&M Bonding.
One spring morning in 1997, Brenda received a call that would be the start of the strangest case of her entire career.
For $50,000. Okay, and what's he charged with?
36-year-old Chuck Siebert had been charged with statutory rape, an accusation he firmly denied. Brenda immediately arranged for a face-to-face meeting with the accused felon.
Hi, Mr. Siebert. I'm Brenda.
Chuck.
Have a seat. Talk to you about the bonding here. So tell me why you think I should bond you out.
I'm innocent. I didn't do anything.
Well, I'm sure that'll be proven in court, okay? I'm not the judge and I'm not the jury, but unfortunately. I sat for some time and I listened to his story. Most of the time, the defendants usually want to tell their side of it, how they're not guilty. But that's not my concern, okay? My concern is that you go to court. And the next thing is that if you don't, I'm gonna come get you. So let's make sure you understand that. We're real clear.
I'm innocent. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, well, I guess I did watch his eyes to kind of see if I could pick up on anything. It's not my decision whether he's guilty or not. However, you still form an opinion. Maybe you keep it to yourself, but I had some concern.
Despite her reservations, Brenda decided to post Chuck's bond. But before they parted company, Brenda gave Chuck one last warning.
Be in court.
I'll be there.
If not, I'm coming for you.
Okay.
I will come and get you, Chuck.
Okay, I'll be there.
All right.
6 weeks later, Chuck Siebert's case took an unexpected turn.
I was having lunch at a diner with my daughter when I noticed something of interest came up on the TV of a man who fell into a river close by, and I was concerned because in a small rural area like we live in, it might have been someone that you knew.
Although officials have not yet located the victim's body, his wallet, hat, and sunglasses have been retrieved.
What is it? It's your guy fell in a river, over here in the Mississippi River. As I sat there and watched the news issue come up that it was a Chuck Siebert.
Well, that's the guy you bonded out, isn't it?
I had him on that $50,000 bond. This idiot didn't drown. When people are on the run, you get a gut feeling. This man didn't drown in the river. There was no body. Knowing the charges that he was on, I figured Chuck Siebert was on the run. I can't believe this. This guy is crazy.
When she gets something inside of her says that that person's not dead or the person's out running or whatever, she is gonna find him and she's determined to.
It's not even about the $50,000. It's the principle to it. It's the justice that needs to be done.
Brenda's first stop was the auto body shop Chuck owned with a partner, one of the co-signers on his bond.
You find him, I want to know about where he's at.
As I spoke with his partner at the body shop, he had decided to start doing a little checking himself.
Hey, Jerry, can you go back there and see if there's any cars missing? Thanks.
The co-signer's reaction to it was pretty much my reaction that Chuck Siebert was not in the river.
That sounds like him, you know?
At this point, when we found out one of the vehicles was gone.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me. The blue one?
Chuck Siebert is the only one that had access, besides the partner, to a fenced-in area that he could have even gotten the car out of it. So we knew at that point it had to have been him. Hi, how are you?
Oh, fine, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. I need to check on a car.
What kind of vehicle?
It's an 87 Thunderbird.
87 T-Bird.
When I found that the car had been impounded many, many miles away from the river, I had enough proof to know that Mr. Siebert was on the run.
Brenda's next stop was a visit to Chuck's girlfriend,
How are you, Amber?
another co-signer on his bond.
Yeah, I need to talk to you for a second.
Kind of busy.
I went to the beauty salon where she was working and asked her if she had been in touch with him.
Man, I feel kind of funny about this.
She was a little reluctant at first, but after talking to her, she just was really, really concerned that her name was on that bond as well, that maybe she better work with me instead of against me. You can get arrested for aiding and abetting, hindering prosecution.
Okay, I talked to him. I'm supposed to pick him up at a truck stop. He wants some clothes and he wants some money. I'm scared.
By this time, my mind's racing. What truck stop? How far has he gone?
I think he's gonna skip town.
Is he gonna call you back? Find out when you're coming?
Yeah.
Okay. Time is of the essence, and the longer you leave him out there, the further he's gonna get away, and you're gonna have a harder time tracking him.
Brenda returned to her office and waited for Chuck to contact his girlfriend with the exact location of the truck stop.
Hello? The girlfriend called me on the phone, saying that Chuck had just called her.
Did he tell you where he's at? Oh, good, good.
She stalled him so that she could contact me and try to make some kind of arrangements.
Where is he going? California? Well, we're gonna have to move on this pretty quick, otherwise we're gonna end up losing him out there.
I tell the girlfriend to tell him you're trying to get some money together to give me time to get to the truck stop so that I could get Chuck Siebert.
Now that Brenda had Chuck's location, she prepared herself for a showdown.
Hi, this is Mom. Yeah, I wanted to give you a call and let you know that I got more information on that guy.
I called my daughter and let her know that I had found him at this truck stop and I was going out there. She asked me to please call the police and get them involved. I had to tell her that they could not get involved. There was not a warrant out there for Chuck Siebert.
But I gotta go get him before he gets out of state.
Well, I told her don't go after him because, if he's going to stage his death, you don't know what he's going to do next.
I will be fine. I will call you when I get back. Don't worry. Bye.
When you're going out to find someone, you don't have time for a whole lot of fear. Your mind is in the mode of, is this man going to give me trouble? Does he carry a gun now? What am I going to expect when I get there? Hopefully it won't be the bad side of it, but you just take that chance when you go after him.
Good morning, CNN Bonding.
When Brenda Dishbine learned that the man she'd posted bond for had presumably drowned 4 days prior to his scheduled court appearance, she knew immediately that he had staged his own death and was on the run.
This idiot didn't drown?
And when her suspicions were confirmed,
Okay, I talked to him. I'm supposed to pick him up at a truck stop.
Brenda raced against the clock to track him down and bring him to justice. Her searches led her to a truck stop on the outskirts of town. The final stop for a man desperate to disappear and a woman desperate to stop him.
When I first walked into the truck stop, I saw Chuck off to the left, overlooking at some maps.
Hey, Chuck. Turn around. Surprise? Thought you'd get away with it, didn't you? Turn around.
Just here to buy some
Let's
stuff.
not cause no problems here.
At that point, I don't think Chuck Siebert knew for sure what he really wanted to do.
I wasn't going anywhere.
Why don't you turn around, Chuck? Don't
I was
make
just
this
here
hard
to
on
buy.
He just had that look on him like something's going to happen here any split second.
Chuck, I don't want to use this.
I noticed that he was canvassing the truck stop to see if he could get away.
Okay, turn around.
You can put that away. You don't need
No.
that.
I tell him that he's either going to turn around and get handcuffed or I'm going to have to shoot him and drag him out of here. It's really his choice. It didn't matter to me either way.
You know what's going on. Turn around. I told you not to run on me, and that's what I meant. So now you go back and sit in jail, buddy. All the way out, Chuck.
As we're going across the parking lot, I'm still not sure what I'm going to do, but I knew I didn't want him in the car with me.
Where are you going to ride, Chuck?
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
No.
So my thought was to put him in the trunk.
Down there, we're going to lay down real easy. I don't want you to get hurt, all right?
He sat down on the edge of the trunk, and I kind of assisted him, and he kind of leaned back and laid in the trunk, and I doubled his feet up and duct taped his feet.
That ain't going to hurt. We'll be over with it just a moment.
Because I figure if he's going to start kicking, he's going to kick the trunk open and jump and run.
Have a nice ride, Chuck, so you want to get there.
When you're in this line of business, you got to do what you got to do.
Chuck! Knock it off!
I had the music on. That way I didn't have to hear him holler at me back there, or for whatever reason he had a problem, I didn't want to hear it. Only thing I wanted to do was get him back to where he needed to be, and that was to jail.
It's Brenda. Can I talk Sergeant, please?
I contacted the authorities to let them know that there was no more missing persons in the river.
Missing persons earlier, and that I have Chuck Siebert.
They asked that I would bring him to their local police station. My whole thinking was that they were going to go ahead and take him into custody because he was on the run.
How can I help you?
But it wasn't going to be that simple.
I'm sorry, can't take him. We don't have a warrant for his arrest.
What, am I supposed to keep him?
Yes.
The authorities told me that he was free to go, and I said, excuse me? He ain't going nowhere. This man's on the run, and I'm not going to lose $50,000 to let him get out there and take off again.
I mean, right now, I need to get rid of him. I'm not going to keep him.
But try as she may, Brenda couldn't convince the authorities to hold him without a court order.
What am I supposed to do with him? This is silly. Can't you get your supervisor or something?
This is Friday evening. The courts are closed. I have no certified paperwork.
I'll talk to your supervisor for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks anyway. Thanks.
I understand.
I have no choice but to hold this man until courts open up on Monday.
Hey, Chuck. Hungry?
Come on, let me go.
Want some pizza? Need something to eat?
By the time I figured out that I'm going to have to babysit him all weekend long, I got on the phone with another bondsman who's a very good friend of mine and asked to bring him over and put him in the basement.
You are going to be here till Monday, so we just work it to liking each other because you're not going to go nowhere and you're going to be as you are.
I kept him chained to a pole and still had to stay with him 24/7 just to make sure Chuck wasn't going to try and break loose.
At least take this stuff off of my feet. My feet are going to sleep.
No, we're not even going to talk about it.
It was a long weekend, and we read some books, watched some TV,
Isn't that pretty?
listened to a little bit of music, played some card games.
No, if I go out before you do, maybe you could just let me go.
Yeah. No, that ain't going to happen.
Can't fault me for trying.
Oh, no.
I'm out.
Good game. See, you're not so bad after all.
And really done a lot of talking. He seemed to want to talk about the whole episode, the case, the reasons for his running, and his family. He actually had a life, but he chose to throw it away.
I do wish you the best of luck. I hope you get all this behind you and you can start out with a good fresh start.
Maybe with good behavior I can get out early.
I think you will. No hard feelings?
No hard feelings.
All right. Thank you. Be first thing in the morning, okay?
Well, when the weekend was over and I got to take him on to jail.
What do we got here?
I got a guy I need to bring back in.
It was kind of a sad thing. You hated to see it happen, but unfortunately, he had to go pay the price.
All right.
Chuck, sorry had to come to this. Good luck.
Well,
He gave me a little hug goodbye and said that he wished me well and told him I apologized for all the inconveniences. And he said, no, he really had a pretty good time.
Thank you.
thank you.
So I turned him over to the authorities and I left the jail.
The next day, following a plea bargain, Charles Siebert was sentenced to 6 years in prison. And 5 years later, the people that know Brenda best are still in awe of what she accomplished.
I've been asked by many people what it takes to be a good bondsperson. And I've always thought that there was only two qualifications. And that was common sense and street smart, and Brenda's got them both.
Well, here, let Mama hold Jaden for just a second here. Hey there, little guy.
Well, if I was a bail jumper, I know I wouldn't want to meet up with my mom. She's pretty stubborn and she's determined to get you, and she'll do exactly that.
My family thinks I'm probably a little crazy, and I know my boss thinks I'm really out of my mind, but that's okay. I just take a lot of pride in what I do. I mean, I really do like my job.
And as for Charles Siebert, the man Brenda apprehended, even he seems to respect Brenda's tenacity.
Chuck has called me since he's gone to prison, and he's not hostile about it. He realizes that it had to be done. He doesn't hold it against me. He's even asked if he could come over when he gets done and shoot some pool. And I said, well, come on ahead, we'll plan something, but I'm gonna whip you when you get here because I already got you once and I'll do it again.